allow Philip to share screen. I do have a timer, so I will have a handmade sign that will tell you when you've got 2 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. So I will just pass straight over to Philip to provide his talk. Looking forward to it.
Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen. Am I correct? Okay, good. So thank you very much to Professor Tracy for inviting me over. And as mentioned, my name is Philip. I'm currently working in the National Sports Institute of Malaysia, and for the past 3 years, including now, I think I have the opportunity to present. This was last year, and this was 2 years ago. So I think it's like what Professor Tracy said, a hat trick. So I graduated with an MSc in sports psychology from Liverpool John Moores University, together with my bachelor degree, and I'm currently doing my doctorate in University of Southern Queensland. So I'm currently working as a sports psychology officer in the National Sports Institute of Malaysia. So what is my role as a sports psychology officer or practitioner is that I work with applied practice. So I work with the national sailors towards Olympics, I work with the swimmers, and I have the opportunity to be in many major games and towards the preparation towards major games. And also as a sports science team leader, as an educator, and also as a researcher. So I think that a lot of opportunities was given to me in my workplace. And most of my time, I'm working with athletes, and I have a lot of opportunities to work with the national athletes and also the national coaches. And for me, talking about motivation, I think being there for them and being able to wear this shirt together with them, preparing them for a major competition is one of the greatest motivation of them all. And to be able to see them being the best version of themselves is the best feeling ever. And it gives me the motivation to wake up every day to work for what day is. So I also had the opportunity to work towards a world record, a Guinness World Record in 2020. And this was a very, I think it's a unique opportunity that not many sports psychology practitioners have the opportunity to work with. So on my topic for today on motivation, and I think that the easiest one, and I think that is very relevant, is to use the Ryan and Desi's definition, which is to be moved to do something. And of course, when we talk about motivation, and I'm definitely sure I'm not going to speak about motivation because I know that this is one of the biggest topic. I think that in psychology, this is one of the biggest topics. We know about intrinsic motivation. The definition is there, but I'm not going to read it. Extrinsic motivation, and of course, a motivation in the Ryan Desi papers, and a lot of researches have been done on it. Then we can talk, of course, on the self-determining continuum by Ryan and Desi, and on the autonomous motivation and control motivation. These are all the theoretical frameworks and the underpinning lying theoretical knowledge that we know and we have studied during our MSCs, our BSCs, and even in our doctorates as well. Among the theories that keep underpinning my practice is, of course, the hierarchical model of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation by Halloran in 1995, and of course the theory of achievement motivation by Atkinson in 1957, because that is, of course, one of the most cited paper, especially on the topic of motivation. So when we talk about motivation, these are among the things that in my practice we do emphasize on. We do mention a lot about the word athlete, and the word that comes with the athlete is the word performance. As we know, sports psychology is all about working with athletes towards major competitions, towards winning, towards losing, towards the outcome. But at times, we tend to forget about the person behind the athlete, which is on the well-being part of it. So being able to be motivated to have that balance between an athlete and a person of performing and also being well is, of course, one of the most important things ever. So these are among the questions that I usually ask to athletes, and usually we work together. One is that what do you want to achieve? Next, what you can achieve. And next is what are you willing to commit to achieve? Like what motivates you? What you want, what you can, and what you commit. Because I like this word, it's called, when you know that you want and you want it badly enough, you will find a way to get it. And in times when you work in sports, and also not just in sports psychology, even in exercise psychology, or working in the health industry, or in the general population, you can see that motivation do plays a very important role. And having that vision or having that goal provides you with an extra extrinsic and intrinsic motivation towards achieving what you want to achieve. And among the questions that we usually... Among the questions that, oops. Okay, all good. Among the questions that we usually talk about is the word success. And these are among the questions that usually can ask to people is that how do you define success? Like successful motivation, what motivates you to be success? And of course, there will be lots of underpinning, understanding or definition that people give you. Like for instance, these are the amount of words that you see: winning medals, records, wealth, teamwork, opportunity for the future, progress, mentally fit, physically fit, enjoyment, social media impact, which has been a big underpinning logic. Yes, we can see that more and more athletes are social media savvy. And you can, of course, in a multicultural environment, spirituality and religion do play a very important role and do motivates you towards in everything that you do in your sports and your life. And finally, is the word family. Like when we work with athletes, especially the younger athletes, there are potential that at times they are involved in sports because of the family that pulls them in. Like I've worked with athletes that their parents, their grandparents are Olympians, which leads them to be motivated to be Olympians. So at times we need to be very, very careful, or we have a chat with them about what do the word athlete or why do you come into sports? Because more than that, it's not just about being motivated, it's also having that understanding and also that pull to keep on preserving what you're doing. And I think at times, these are among the common understanding that we see in sports, especially what motivates them. Among the things, I will usually put it into 9 different elements about motivation. And one of it, of course, is the purpose. And where does your motivation come from and what is the purpose of your motivation? Next is the perspective of that person. Next, we will move towards the attitude of the person towards that particular motivation. What is the strategies towards enhancing your motivation? The support that you have. It could be a good support and it could be a bad support that will hinders your motivation as well during your sports and your life. How do you manage your motivation? What are the energy levels that comes with the motivation? Does it energize you or does it actually pulls away a lot of the energy from what you're doing and your commitment as well? The progress towards your motivation. Of course, we understand that motivation, emotion, confidence, performance, it does not go on a linear level. It usually will fluctuate and you will see the fluctuation, and it's the same like motivation as well. So having the ability and the capacity to be able to monitor the progress and also manage that fluctuation is of course very, very important, especially in our line of work. And finally, of course, is the outcome. Outcome is not just about winning, it's also about looking at the progress of how it is, because at the end of the day, when you are an athlete, you will have target and you will have a goal. So knowing and understanding that outcome is of course extremely important towards having a motivation towards doing what you want to do. And I usually like to use this as a good example towards how we prep our athletes and having to what we call it as a strong and trusted motivational support team. And of course, when we work in a big surround setting, you have the coaching staff, you have the sports science staff, the family and friends organization, and the sports medicine team. You're working in a group team. And we hope that everyone is with that athlete-centered approach, having the common goals and expectations. And finally, is to be using an integrative, cooperative, and psychological safe environment, and towards working together in providing the optimal support. And I always like to describe it like an F1 pit stop. And the athlete is like the F1 car. And the reason why I use the word driving in my title is because actually the athlete is almost like driving a car. You can provide all the motivational environment. You can provide all the motivation support. At the end of the day, the athletes are the one who is going to be able to drive the car and to be able to execute what is being prepared, because they are the only one that will be standing on the competitive field to be able to perform. And other than that, our job is to be able to sit back and to be able to support them. That's what we do. These are among the 4 elements that when we work, not just in motivation, also in performance and in our life, I usually emphasize on and we usually work on. One is on the demands. What is required in your sports and in your life? Next is what are the resources that you have? What do you have? The barriers that you face in sports, in life, there will be challenges that you will face. And to be able to monitor to and be able to overcome the challenges is the one that will actually enhance your motivation, or at times the challenges will actually hinder your motivation towards what you want to achieve. And finally, what are the strategies that you have in place to be able to achieve it? These are, of course, like when we know about the psychological coping strategies, the psychological management skills. These are among, I think, that the 4 elements that when I'm working with athletes, working with people, these are the things that I will emphasize on. It's the same like when, as I said earlier, about driving a car. And this is actually a Ferrari Roma car. Having a car, having a good body, having a nice price to attack. How about the engine that you have, that motivational engine that you have in your car, and especially in an athlete? Is it good enough? Is it competent enough? Is it strong enough? Or how about the steering that you have, the GPS system that you have, or even the tires, or even the fuel that you have? And motivation is like the fuel that goes into the car. Without motivation, at times, it's almost like most of my athletes usually tell me, without motivation, they felt like zombies, walking around without any meaning in life. But at times, when we talk to coaches, coaches will say that, oh, my athletes is not motivated. These are the common terms that we usually hear from. But if you really think back to a person's perspective and a life perspective, it is quite challenging and it's quite difficult to be extremely motivated every moment of your life. It's almost the same like when it's quite impossible to be happy all the time. And as I said earlier, motivation, emotional, psychological status will fluctuate and will changes as time goes by. And to be able to know it and be able to be comfortable with it is extremely important. It's the same like what I mentioned earlier. It's like driving a car towards your goals. Your motivation at times will energize you. And you think about your motivations energizing your efforts and self. Or is your motivation actually create a disruption to your efforts and self? And you have that opportunity or that decision making to ponder on which are the motivation that you want to choose. At the end of the day, it is entirely down to your decision, and everyone in the field or surrounding you will be supporting you to be able to create or come with the best motivation to achieve the targets and the goals that you want. When I work and as I study through the MSCs, the BSCs, and also my doctorate, I always notice that this word comes a very useful thing is that do you have enough tools in your psychological toolbox? It could come with qualification, competencies, the theories, the approaches, the skills, the evidence, the attitude, and the management. To be able to have more skills and more tools in your own toolbox, it actually helps you as a practitioner to create that motivation for yourself, and also to help the athletes to be able to understand their own motivation and to help them towards achieving their goals. These are among the processes that is useful. I use this, what we call it as a site mapping tool, to be able to understand where the motivation of the athletes and how they are able to use it, utilize it well. And of course, you can use some art-based therapy, mindful diary, arts, photography, and even music to be able to guide them through the motivation levels. Having a reflective practice, I think, is so important, especially for those that want to go into the field, because it's not just about identifying the missing pieces, it also helps you to enhance the effectiveness of the pieces that you possess. And these are among the questions that I usually ask to my athletes and even to myself. What are the motivation in life and sports that energize you? Who motivates you and inspires you? Where are you moving towards your motivation? Why are you motivated to keep on pursuing your goals? When do you feel successful? And how can you achieve more and become better? To be able to have that reflective practice, to know and to think about it is, of course, one of the most important things in sports and also in life. Using this tool, the motivation interviewing, especially for the younger and also upcoming sports psychologists, is of course important because this is an extremely useful toolbox that you can add to your arsenal that you have. And finally, before I end my presentation, I think that having the motivation and helping athletes to gain the motivation, helping coaches, helping people, do you take care of your own self? Because you cannot help others if you yourself are being burned out. And I always like to emphasize on the word that you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first, because, of course, always remember that never underestimate the impact that you have on other people's time and also in the day, because it's good to at times help ask people about, are you okay? Are you fine? Is there anything that I can do for you? And remember this, alone we can do so little, together we can achieve so much more. You will not allow this to happen to your phone. Do not allow it to happen to you either. Always remember that self-care is a priority. No matter how motivated you are, no matter how strongly you feel, there will be times that you will lose some motivation. Understand that it is okay, and we'll find the ways and find the strategies to be able to gain back the motivation and slowly move back towards achieving your goals. Finally, if you have time, you have opportunity, I wish you all the best, and hopefully we'll see you one day in Malaysia.
Thank you, Philip. That's great. Yes, I'm excited for my trip to Malaysia this month. So yeah,
Yeah.
well done. Thanks so much for that talk. I suspect a lot of people are feeling very motivated. I'm going to open up the floor. We've got time for a question. If anyone wants to ask Philip a question.
Hi, I have a question.
Great. You go, Alice.
If you were a coach and you'd noticed that an athlete had lost motivation, how would you go about bringing that motivation back in the athlete?
Usually when we talk about motivation, and usually with athletes ask me, and I do face these issues, is that we will go back to what actually that leads to the athlete to be motivated in the first place. And at times when I start working with athletes, I usually would suggest athletes to even write a diary or even write down some of their thoughts. And actually, when you look back to the reflective practice or the things that you write to, it actually helps you to gain back the motivation. It's always going back. I always like to use a word that we call it back to basic. It's always going back to the basic and the simple things that you do at the start. And having that, it actually helps you to gain back slowly the motivation that you have towards achieving what you want to achieve.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Philip. Anyone got a last minute question? Got 1 minute.
Could I quickly just ask a quick question on a motivation? So probably touches more on your PhD than your practical work. But if you're doing research and you discover, there's various scales, you talk about Ryan and DC, and a lot of those Likert scales, you'll get average. So you'll get, not satisfied, not frustrated. Can you talk a little bit about a motivation?
I think it is, because I think that a motivation doesn't truly means that it is completely no motivation at all. Because I think that as we look through a lot of the times, and if you look through the resources and also the research, a lot of times people always mention the word that says that about intrinsic motivation or even extrinsic motivation, which is more important. And at times, a motivation actually helps the athletes, and I've spoken with some athletes that having that a motivation actually helps them to think about what is the best way forward. Why does it lead to a motivation, or what is the best motivation for them to move forward? So having to be in that scenario, despite it is a bit much more negative, it actually provides them with thinking patterns. But it also sees that how do you create that platform for them to think and for them to consider what is the next step forward.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Philip. Really nice to hear your presentation again. And yeah, well done. We'll move on to our next speaker. We've got Lorraine Cullen. Yeah, she's back in the room. I think she got chucked out. So hoping that Lorraine is here. And Lorraine is going to be speaking about the integration of psychology and nutrition support in sport. You hear, Lorraine? See your name. Can't hear you, Lorraine.
Hello.
Oh, you're there. Yay. You're here. I can't see your face, but I can hear you now.
I am here. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, but I think it's cutting out. Hopefully you'll be able to share your slides. Still kind of cutting out, Lorraine.
Oh,
Zoom and Wi-Fi. I wonder
oh,
if
this
you,
is typical.
I wonder if you stop your, I'll see if I can, if you stop your video, maybe it'll allow your Wi-Fi to work harder, maybe. And do you want me to, have you got your slides and I can share them for you? Okay, let's see. You try talking again, Lorraine, and I can see if I can share your slides. Oh, you're there.
Is that better?
Yay!
Hotspot. I'm now sitting on the floor. I'm now trying to work out, right, view, slideshow.
Yeah.
Hilarious. I'm sorry, everybody.
That's okay.
Okay, is that, can you hear me?
We can hear you, we can see you, we just don't have your slides. But I can share you.
Excellent. And are you timing me?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a sign, 2 minutes when you're up.
Oh, I'm going to get a treat. Okay, hello, everybody. Sorry about that. So, I'm going to have to wrap through this because I end up speaking a lot. So I think we've got 20 minutes, and obviously I'd like to answer any questions that anybody has. So we'll try and get that in at the end. So I'm looking at how, from my experience, how psychology and nutrition support works together and combines in sport. So just a little bit about why I've gotten to where I am. I suppose my formative years probably influenced mostly because I suffered anorexia nervosa as a teenager, and I very much focused on the physical side of my recovery. I was very, very motivated to be a very strong athlete again, and that was sort of the thing that I realized that I needed some help to work on my diet. So my professional path was very much influenced by this want to understand, and the belief that I really believed that athletes and how they ate had such an impact on performance. As I say here, I focused very much on my physical recovery, didn't really think about much about psychology. I think probably because it was too hard to go there. It's far easier, well, it wasn't easy at all, but to think about physical. And I think when somebody loses a lot of weight, or somebody's in the depth of an eating disorder, that seems to be the most sort of, in your face. You're like, oh, it's to do with the body and the physicalities of that. I went on and worked in many high performance environments. Rugby was my big thing, so I worked for the Scottish rugby team, and then ended up laterally going to Australia and working in AFL, which is an amazing sport if anyone gets a chance to watch some of that. So I was very much focused on the nutrition side, nutrition, but you can't do that without speaking to people and trying to understand behavior, and it just integrates. So, I think we're probably all quite aware of that. I also worked in weight making sports, did some work in eating disorders as well, clinically, which we're not going to go into today. But obviously there's always that element when we speak about nutrition and psychology. I've just finished a doctorate in sport and exercise psychology, and most of my research was looking at my path to why I'm now a sports psychologist. So continually reflecting, as I'm sure we all do in sport. And if you're a psychologist, you'll know a lot about reflection. So the aims for today, I know, as I say, I've only probably got about 15 minutes left.
Lorraine, I'm just conscious that you're not sharing your slides, but I don't know if you were sharing.
Oh, I am sharing my slides on my side.
Maybe it's just me. Can anyone else see
Oh
slides?
no.
So I
I
mean,
can't see them either.
Okay.
Oh no, they're so good. Maybe, how did I get? Oh, how does this work?
Can you, is at the bottom, can you see share slides? If you just
I
click
did
on
do that.
and then,
Let me escape this. If I pressed escape, was that going to? So all I can see is my slides.
all right.
If I press escape, oh no, there we go. So if I go back to, oh no.
Yeah, sometimes when I was doing it before, it was filling up my full slides, but then I couldn't find my Zoom. I
Let
can
me
always
try
share
again.
your slides if you want.
I'm sorry, everybody. This is like a crash. Crash. Can you see my screen?
Oh yeah,
You can see my
I
screen.
can see half of your screen. Yeah, there we are. We can see it now. Just say put it in
I
slideshow
should be
mode.
able to view it if I go to play from start.
Yep, there we are. Good.
Yeah, that's all good.
Oh, good, great. 10 minutes left. I love to be under pressure. Okay, so this is what I was going around, just a little bit about myself. I'm not here to talk about myself, but it does help to maybe understand the context of where I'm coming from. So the aims for today, under time pressure, but I suppose the main thing on this is just to increase curiosity as a coach working in sport, how the two disciplines really interact. And it's not, I don't want to come from a negative reductionist sort of thoughts. It's more, I would like to, in this, maybe start thinking, right, how can we integrate strategies when we're talking about nutrition and psychology? And the important, I suppose, secondary to that, if you're lucky and you have a multidisciplinary team, the benefits of working across that multidisciplinary team and together, not so much in silo. Want it to be practical as possible. I'm a very practical individual, and I think that's really important. I'm not here as an academic as such. I hope that's okay with everybody, but I am an academic, obviously, in quotes. So I always start thinking about when I'm looking at an athlete or a team, like just thinking about the training week. So when I think about nutrition, how can that benefit an athlete in that training week? So I suppose when I'm working with somebody, I always think the diet is like a foundation scaffolding that behaviors and training can all sit within that. So it's quite a nice hook, if you like, if you're trying to think of some way that you can start talking about somebody about their diet or about behaviors. And this can have a massive impact on confidence, ownership, accountability. So we've all got to remember we all eat for reasons that are very personal to ourselves. And it's if there's a lot going on, with your training or anxiety, just actually having that, we all know about training plans are very important, but also your diet plan for somebody that might just help reduce any anxiety or the unknown. Thinking about energy balance and how much energy balance over, if we're thinking about a training week, how that can fluctuate and how that can maybe impact cognitive adaptations, if you're trying to focus, if you're trying to learn skills, and again, confidence and motivation. Hydration is a big one. 2% of body loss can cause a cognitive function, cognitive infunction. That doesn't really make sense. But what I'll do is your athlete might start to perceive things a little bit harder. Their psychomotor skills might be impacted, and I've got accumulation over a week because I think that's really important. We often think, or people think we've got 24 hours, for food and nutrition, and we then just start from the beginning. It's like 24 hours. That's not obviously what happens, and that's why hydration on a Monday is really impactful on, say, game day on a Saturday or Sunday. So being aware of that. How it impacts your sleep, downtime, rest, overall well-being. And then it can be as much as thinking about the micronutrients or different minerals like iron, vitamin B12 deficiencies, and how that impacts somebody's mood, their motivation and ability to concentrate. If you're thinking about a team, this is a great, there's so much there with a team, and it can be really useful thinking about nutrition and how that again, thinking about it behaviorally and what are the norms in the team? You know, can that increase cohesion? Can that give each other accountability? You know, teams I've worked with, they maybe G each other up if they've not, you know, eating that, or maybe not. Obviously, we've got to be nice here, but you know, if you've not got your water bottle, or just start thinking about like what little behaviors do we observe and could we integrate into our team. Team meals, eating together, obviously that increases relationship. It could be that the coach starts eating. You might have a team room. At the Swans, we had a very basic team room. It was a bar, you know, and I managed to make that into an area that we all ate together as a team, but also as a wider multidisciplinary team. They've now got this posh kitchen and their new facilities, but I would like to think that it all started off in the little bar area. So you don't need facilities. It's just thinking, right, what can this meal do on the pitch, if you like? Alcohol, obviously, increasing team rules. So it might be that the leadership group thinks about putting down some rules, and then that gives the players autonomy. Coffee culture, downtime, depending if you're working in elite sport, there's, you know, going for coffee is great, but actually drinking a lot of coffee all the time, caffeine has a massive impact on anxiety, energy levels. Can be really beneficial for cohesion and going out, but just being aware of what's actually happening in that downtime, that sort of coffee culture. Maybe it's more an Aussie thing, I don't know, but I think it's worldwide. And staff as well. You know, this is not just for players. This is, you know, you maybe got a grumpy coach. It's like, well, maybe they're drinking too much coffee. Cooking, like skills, just trying to think about outside of what athletes do outside training. You know, it can be a very good thing, and actually time together, having meals together. I saw that just sparked off a whole new interest in a lot of players or athletes. I'm talking players and athletes because I always think of just team sports, so excuse me if that doesn't fit your sport, but yeah, that's where I'm coming from. We used to have, I know maybe it was like 15 years ago, things like Fat Club, and I know that's terrible, you couldn't say that now, but it's said, and actually thinking about how obsessed we are with the data and body compositions. And this is a real hot topic, I think, of how we support our athletes around that narrative, and actually thinking about, do we have to ask permission for these things? So anyway, that's a whole different presentation in itself, but we're not going to go there. Right, oh, that's changed now. I'm having a right good day here. Right, here we are. And I'm going to move myself. So I suppose a lot about how psychology and nutrition fit together is thinking about behavior change, because if we think about eating, it's a behavior. Obviously, it's a very important behavior when we're trying to exercise, trying to recover. And in a team or as an individual athlete, what culture we come from obviously impact our beliefs. Our environment in sport is a culture. So that's really important, I suppose, by thinking back to the last slide about what the narrative is like in that culture. You could set up like recovery bars, team meals, hydration stops, so it actually just becomes an integrative process in the team. We often get nutritionists in and we do a lot of talk, box ticked, you know, and actually that doesn't actually have much impact. Like the research is starting to finally say that maybe actually using some behavioral change models from psychology would have a very big impact in sport. So thinking about the behavior change wheel, looking at compatible, I can't say that. I'm having a moment. Opportunities, motivation, people's capabilities, and that could just be, can they cook? You know, what is the social impact? Let's look at motivation. Obviously, it's an emotion. So what's going on there for the athlete? Just gets that little bit deeper for that behavior change. Okay, so game day, competition day, absolutely practicing. We practice everything, don't we? Like skill wise, you know, you're doing the shot over and over again. We have our strategic plans on the pitch, but actually having that practice nutrition plan is so important for confidence. Getting to know ourselves, become more aware, we make better decisions. often I would come back to that boredom on game day. All the boys used to go out for coffee in the morning, you know, and they probably wouldn't usually do that, you know, in training. And then it's like, actually, is that impacting their anxiety, hydration, timings when you eat, you know, that can, and that's very individual. Some people are very psychosomatic with nerves. We all like, there's going to be an element of nerves, and it's trying to see what we can do to reduce that, but also being aware that actually your gut function might be different on game day. And then supplements, talked about hydration, but supplements, you maybe give out caffeine tablets, but have you practiced that? You know, is that chewing gum actually going to be beneficial in the third quarter or whatever? So it's actually trying to link up what might be more a nervous reaction behaviorally. Is that actually helping performance on game day? So this is just a quite, you know, thinking about how nutrition can impact psychology in the game or in the performance, and things like caffeine, macronutrients like caffeine, you know, there's research that if you put a bit of caffeine, carbohydrate, like a jelly in your mouth at a certain time, that can actually reduce perceived exertion and just give you that little boost. And that might be something you use strategically. Caffeine is very good strategically, but you kind of need to know what you're doing with it. Obviously, if you've got a low energy availability, that'll have a massive physical impact, but then fatigue might kick in, which, thinking about focus, concentration, decision making, which will then maybe have a knock-on injury impact, which we do not want. Just quickly, hydration. So as you can see there, it's probably one of the biggest things that, you know, we think physically, but for psychologically, it can have a very big impact. Psychology, physiology, it's all interlinked, but sometimes we like to put them in boxes. So it's just trying to think, right, is this situation that we're getting, is that to do with the physical side, or is it a accumulation of things? What can we do to help prevent caffeine? I'm not going to go too much into it because I'm aware of time. I think I've got a minute left. But as you can see there, there's so much research on caffeine and how it's such a positive and great stimulant, but it can actually be quite impactful. So it's really important to use that wisely. Again, caffeine, I'm actually on the decaf at the moment, which is because I know my anxiety can get through the roof. Iron, just so mineral iron, you know, you might have somebody who's maybe low energy intake, maybe decided to become vegetarian, you know, that can actually have a massive impact on moods and your anxiety. So if you've got an athlete who's maybe just the way they're presenting themselves maybe has changed a little bit, that could be more to do with certain minerals or their actual nutrition intake. So flipping it round, I suppose, thinking about how psychology impacts how we eat. As I sort of said before, we all have our own beliefs and assumptions. We have habits, which then guide our behavior. So maybe how you believe something, and everybody has beliefs, and social media is a nightmare. If you are trying to educate, you come from a scientific background, but oh no, so-and-so says this. So it's trying to work with that. Time management, planning can cause unintentional energy balance. So you've maybe heard of RED-S, which is restrictive energy in sport. And that might not actually be intentional. It could just be that somebody's really bad at planning their time, you know, needing just a bit more help. Or it could be that you're really trying to have rigid rules in your diet. So that's something to be aware of, that there can be quite a different presentation or different reasons why somebody is maybe in negative energy balance. Could be a safety behavior. We might all go to the fridge if we're a bit stressed, you know, we might not. Some people do, some people don't. So just being aware of that and how that can impact your food choices. And use sport as a hook. You know, we're thinking about behavior change, motivation. I always love to, you know, if I'm working with somebody on their diet, it's like, right, what is the hook here? What can we use to change behavior that's bigger than the nutrition itself? How are we doing for time? Probably just about out of time.
Yeah, sorry, Lorraine.
Right. So I'll just finish off, but here are some strategies that you've maybe heard in the psychology world, and I was going to go through them and how we can link them, but I suppose all I need to say is that there's a massive opportunity for them to be linked. For confidence, anxiety, practice, and just round up, that's all pretty straightforward there. We probably don't have time for questions, but
Thanks so much, Lorraine. Yeah, we probably don't have time for questions because our athlete panel's starting in 5 minutes, but
oh yeah,
I thought that was super interesting, and I have so many questions actually, because my mind was going off in different places, thinking of teams, thinking about the impact of teammates and people's eating habits. Like, it's a massive field, isn't it?
It's a massive, and you can't fit it, like actually putting it together for that time. I was like, what am I doing here? It was just a quick, but I hope it's just sparked off like it has for you, Tracy, just a few different thoughts. So
yeah,
done.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much for persevering with all.
Yeah, sorry about the technical
stuff.
side. It's always a challenge. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. So everybody, if we leave this room, we're going to go into the main room, and we've got our athlete discussion panel that will be starting at 2 o'clock. So time for a quick tea break maybe, and then if we head back there, that would be great. So thanks so much for both of our speakers, Philip and Lorraine. Very enjoyable talks. So see you all in the main room. Thank you.